All right, let's get right into it. What if I told you that the secret code to pretty much every great movie, play, or book you've ever loved was written down almost 2,400 years ago? I know, it sounds a little crazy, but that's exactly what we're going to unpack today, this ancient Greek blueprint for amazing storytelling.
Just think about it for a sec. Why does some stories stick with you for years, while you forget others the moment the credits roll? Is it the cool characters? The crazy special effects? Well, turns out an ancient philosopher named Aristotle had a surprisingly modern answer, and it all boils down to a very specific formula.
And we're talking about his masterpiece, the Poetics. Now don't worry, this isn't some dusty, boring old book. You gotta think of it more like the original instruction manual for creating stories that have a real, powerful, and lasting impact. It's literally the foundation for all of modern drama and literature. So where does Aristotle even begin? Well, he starts with this one single, really powerful idea about what art is in the first place. He basically argues that all stories, at their very core, are an act of imitation. The fancy Greek word he used for this was mimesis, and for Aristotle, this was everything. It was the foundation. He believed our need to tell stories comes from a super basic human instinct to imitate the world and the people around us. So whether it's an epic poem, a play, or song, it's all at the end of the day a representation of human life and human action. To put it really simply, stories are a mirror. They're not just some random fantasy to escape into. No, they're held up to our own world, and they reflect something true about who we are and how we live. And that reflection? That's exactly why they hit us so hard.
Okay, so if stories are an imitation of life, how do you actually build a good one? Aristotle was obsessed with tragedy, and he basically put it under a microscope, breaking it down into what he saw as 6 essential parts. And here they are: plot, character, thought, diction, melody, and spectacle. Now today we tend to fixate on character, right? Or maybe the spectacle of a big blockbuster movie. But Aristotle had a really clear hierarchy. For him, the most important element, the absolute soul of a story, was the plot, what he called the mythos. He argued that without a solid plot, even the most fascinating characters just stuck. They have nowhere to go.
So, what makes a plot great? Well, it's not really about shocking twists or huge explosions. For Aristotle, a great plot is all about logic and structure. It needs to feel like a complete, unified whole. It has to have a logical chain of cause and effect with a clear beginning, a middle, and an end that feels totally inevitable.
And within that plot, he pointed out 2 super powerful tools. First, you've got reversal. That's an external thing, when the hero's fortune suddenly flips from good to bad. And then you have recognition. That's the internal shift, when a character suddenly goes from being ignorant to understanding the truth. You know, that big aha moment. And when you get a reversal and a recognition happening at the same time, that's pure dramatic gold.
So what usually triggers this downfall? Well, it's a concept called hamartia. And this is a big one. It's not just a simple character flaw like being clumsy. It's a specific, tragic error in judgment, a crucial mistake the hero makes that directly leads to their own ruin. Man, this all sounds pretty dark, doesn't it? A hero makes one mistake and their whole life just falls apart. So why on earth do we find these stories so compelling? Well, this brings us to the ultimate point of tragedy, the emotional effect it has on us, the audience. It's a fantastic question when you stop to think about it. Why do we willingly pay money and spend our time watching stories that we know are going to make us feel sad or even scared? Aristotle actually had a name for this strange and powerful emotional payoff. He called it catharsis. The idea is that by watching a tragedy play out, the audience gets to experience these really intense emotions, pity for the character and fear that something similar could happen to us. And by feeling those emotions so strongly, but in a totally safe environment, we get to purge them. We cleanse them from our system. I mean, think about that feeling of relief you get after a really good cry during a powerful movie. That's catharsis. It's kind of like an emotional reset button. And for Aristotle, providing that cleansing experience for the audience is the whole point of telling a tragic story in the first place.
And you have to believe me on this. These aren't just some dusty, ancient ideas. The principles that Aristotle laid out in the Poetics are still the fundamental building blocks of the stories we absolutely love today.
Just look at this timeline, from ancient Greece to Shakespeare's plays, which are just full of reversal, recognition, and hamartia, all the way to modern Hollywood. I mean, screenwriting guides today are still built on the core ideas of a unified plot, a hero's fatal flaw, and that ultimate goal of emotional catharsis. It's amazing. So let's do a super quick recap of the big takeaways. First, remember that stories are a form of mimesis. They're a mirror reflecting real life. Second, when you're building a story, plot is king. The structure is the most important part. And finally, the whole goal of a great tragedy is to give the audience catharsis, that powerful, cleansing emotional release. And that brings us to the end. But I want to leave you with this final thought. The next time you sit down to watch a movie or pick up a book, I want you to look for these things. Look for the reversal. Look for that moment of recognition. Spot the hero's fatal error, their hamartia. Because I promise you, once you learn to see this ancient blueprint, you are going to start seeing it absolutely everywhere.